Welcome everybody. We're excited to talk to you about working in the open at Digital Service in Germany today. And to start with, who are we? We are Martin, and many of you will know him already, our head of design with a long history in public service design, working for GDS for many years before joining Digital Service about 10 months ago, I think.
Yes, and with me is Pamela, who worked in the private sector information industry for more than 20 years before then joining Digital Service as the head of communications at the end of 2021.
So what we'll be talking about, and I hope there won't be too much repetition because as regards to the things we've already heard. We will give you a very brief introduction to Digital Service and our role, look a bit deeper into our beliefs, and then guide you through our universe, which is quite interesting, and an idea of working in the open. And plus, obviously, give you lots of examples of what we do and how we do it. So who is Digital Service and what is our role? We are the federal government central digitalization unit, and we transform government through digital delivery. So this means we do stuff. We are not just writing strategies, we actually create digital products and services. Digital Service was established about roughly 2 years ago in October 2020. Our core offering is the agile, user-centered and effective development of digital services for the German federal government. In addition, we aim at expanding the digital and transformation expertise within the government, and by doing so, bring about the change needed for real digital transformation. Our offer is actually based on 2 pillars. On the one hand, and this is today our core offering, we have our own product delivery and unit developing user-centered public services, as you know from the GDS. And in addition, and this is how we actually started in the first place, before being transformed into a government digital service, we run 2 fellowship programs, which are called Tech for Germany and Work for Germany. Legally, we are a limited company, 100% owned by the German federal government. And this may be quite interesting because it's a quite unusual setup. So we are not a government department.
Yes, so briefly, I'll be speaking about our beliefs. And one of the catchphrases that we started with was public money, public code, because of course it's way more than just code in the sense of software that we write. So you can also say kind of like public money, public property. But that was kind of a core at the very start, because one of the initiatives before our unit was created was also a huge hackathon at the beginning of the COVID crisis, and all the stuff that happened through that hackathon, which I think got an entry in the Guinness Book of Records or something, for kind of like the biggest thing held. So all of that stuff was available, made available. And we genuinely believe that, well, people paying taxes have already paid for the work that we are doing now. And with that, there comes some responsibility. And in a democracy, transparency and public accountability must be a given. So people have to be able to scrutinize what we are doing because, well, it's their right. And another driver, freedom of information legislation is in place in many countries, as well in Germany. So various levels of government, they have been trying in response to also like kick off some open data and transparency initiatives. But sometimes you have to say they are kind of like a little bit less than what has been promised. So therefore, freedom of information requests might be coming. So let's rather be proactive and share instead of waiting for maybe some FOI requests, because we can do much better and kind of like reduce the need for these in the first place.
And taking these beliefs Martin has just highlighted, what does this actually mean for the way we work and communicate at Digital Service? There's only one answer we find. We want to work in the open as much as we can. Next one, please. This may sound easy to start with, but when Digital Service was founded, it was placed into a kind of very complex ecosystem of all sorts of organizations, bodies, and stakeholders, which looks like this. And this tiny little spot in the upper left-hand corner being us, the blue one. And this complexity results primarily from the federal system we have in Germany, with the federal government, which you may know maybe as Ampel Coalition or Traffic Light Coalition at the moment. And then we have 16 different Bundesländer, so federal states with their own decentralized governments and institutions, plus tens of thousands of municipalities with their own bodies. And when it comes to digitalization and digital transformation, the whole governance structure, therefore, is highly fragmented and involves an incredible, really incredible amount of different stakeholders from all levels and groups. And what's more, we are not only facing this highly complex landscape, but also some challenging general conditions. And the first is transparency is not part of the administrative culture. And despite freedom of information legislation and a general democratic setup, transparency is not really part of this culture. This definitely also applies to how ministries deal with digitalization projects, which is the domain we're working in after all. Citizens have lost trust in the capabilities of the federal administration. Recent research shows a dramatic decline in trust as regards the way our administration is organized and performs, as well as in democracy in total. Open source is not a standard. Quite a huge part of the digital administrative landscape in Germany is dominated by closed source software. So with a lot of challenging consequences, such as vendor logins and a lack of trust by civil society. And finally, the discussion on digitalization and individual projects, such as, for example, on digital identities, is dominated by third parties. What do I mean by saying this? Communications is largely reactive and very rarely driven proactively, which means the administration does very often not own the story, with lots of wrong and misleading information out there in media and social media, wherever you look. At quite an early stage, we have therefore decided to counter this situation with what we felt was the only possible solution, a maximum of transparency. And transparency, though, is not a goal in itself, but it is a vehicle. It's a vehicle to re-strengthen trust in the administration and in the long run, hopefully also in democracy in total. It's a vehicle to interact with civil society and other stakeholders to find optimal solutions. It's a vehicle to allow others to build up on and reuse our deliverables like code, concepts, findings. And finally, to own the story, minimize wrong information and fake news. And last but not least, minimize crisis potential. What did we do to get there? First and foremost, we had to find a definition shared by the entire organization, a definition of what is working in the open for digital service. Then, second step, we drafted a basic communications model, which I will show you in a minute. And middle of last year, we actually started building up a team of comms experts working closely with our delivery teams, because we know that including communications in their daily work is hard, because it takes a lot of time and it puts a lot of strain on many people who maybe don't feel like natural writers. And then we just started and have been learning ever since. And obviously learning means iterating. So before we take a look at the communications model, let's have a look at our definition of working in the open. It's about the what, the why, and the how. And this is it. And some of you may know it because we've acted a bit like a copycat. We have copied a great concept somebody else has come up with. In this case, Ben Holiday ex-GDS. Because when we were looking around for a definition, we found this was exactly what we're trying to find. So working in the open means fully owning and sharing your story. It includes your successes and your failures. It's not about positioning or political spin. It means transparency in what you're working on and why, and ideally includes sharing what you learned from your users and how this is shaping the decisions you make. And this is what it looks like in theory. I won't go too much into detail. You can have a look later if you want to. But maybe what's important, we try to start at the very beginning of a project. So whenever there's a contract signed, and we work on a contract basis, so this may be very different from other digital service units, we get really contracts to do a project. And whenever a contract is signed, we start communicating about the project. So like blogging on the what, how, and why of a project, making the project visible on our website, sharing information via social media, and whenever possible, and this is a real hard fight sometimes, disclosing the contract, which is lying underneath, and including really like pages of information about why we're doing this and where we're heading. And then we continue during a project. We do a lot of incident-based communication. So we are not planning our communications, as Jais has already pointed it out. It doesn't make sense because you don't know what's lying ahead. You don't know what's coming. We work like iteratively. So whenever there's something we feel we must share or something that's valuable to share, we share it, and we don't follow a fixed plan. So this may be milestones, successes, failures, codes, pieces of code, prototypes, and we use our blog, social media. We publish assets and code on GitHub. We conduct workshops and speak at conferences and other occasions. And all this does not stop with the MVP, obviously, but it continues. Next slide, please. To the end of a project, because there are sometimes projects or services that we retire or that we drop out of. That happens. And in this case, we also communicate on the why and the how. And so all of this is fully shared with the public. So, and this has been a lot of theory now, but how does it finally look like? First of all of our projects are visible. Really, all projects are visible on our website with link posts, blog posts, and GitHub repositories. We have a blog, and the blog is available in German, and parts of it are available in English, not everything. And we're currently publishing around 2 to 3 blog posts per month on average about projects, about methods, about findings, about the fellowship programs, about our team members, about we're just giving lots of insights into digital service. The code, next one, yeah, the code we write in other assets like posters are available on GitHub and open to the public. And we have a growing transparency section and page on our website, again, both in German and English. And among many other things like financial information and general information, it also contains, as we said earlier on, contracts. Like this is a framework contract agreement with, I think in this case, the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Justice. And we run events, or in particular, one big event every year, which is linked to our fellowship programs. And we have a couple of hundreds of civil servants attending from virtually all of the ministries in the federal government. We participate in a lot of public sector events, often for a very specific and knowledgeable audience, where we place experts on panels and hold like keynotes. And but we also speak to the general public, and we have a very, very nice event in Germany every summer, which is an open door of the federal government. And I think last year they had over 100,000 people coming. And for example, this is a photograph showing our CEO, Christina. She's the one on the right-hand side, in discussion with the Federal Minister for Digital and Infrastructure. And handing over to Martin again.
Cool. So I'm sharing a bit kind of like the design side of that. So going into some bit of further detail, and that again, like nicely ties as well to what Pamela showed regarding the complex landscape where it operating in, but also it's related to the various things that Giles has mentioned, because we are trying to make our work visible and we connect to the outside world. And all of that we do mostly via writing, via speaking and publishing. And one reason to connect is, well, we need to transform the wider public sector. You saw kind of like this massive network, right? So we are trying to really raise the bar for what good looks like. And I heard as well this before, the second reason is also recruitment. So the German public sector is still perceived as being boring and dull and restrictive. So we really need to show that the digital service is different. It's exciting and it's possibly even cool. So here, for example, you see a blog post, that one is in German, about how we're involving users in the development process. So it gives you kind of like a good overview of the range of user research approaches that we have been using in various projects, and what we're working on in quite some detail. As we're working multidisciplinary teams, it also means that we are blogging together. So here's, for example, in the background, a blog post that's also available in English about how we've been using magic links instead of user accounts in a specific service. And that's written by a senior designer, Tina, and Christian, our head of engineering. And as part of the blog post, we're trying to make things as available as possible. So here's one blog post about digital identity. And that, for example, contains the very detailed user experience that people have. So a detailed journey map that is available for download in like high res and PDF. So other people can build upon the discovery work that we have done, and they can make use of our findings, because, as I said, it's public money. So it's public property as well. And some of us are actually writing week notes publicly, which you also heard Giles talking about quite a lot, which is really a great way of reflecting our work, document our learnings really openly to everyone, and also sometimes start some conversations with others. And then another format that we participated in was in autumn, because there was a 2-day seminar organized by the French government. So some of our designers, some of our engineers and product managers went to Paris. It's always great to go to Paris, right? For really good exchange with colleagues from France, from Belgium, Cyprus, the UK, and the European Commission. And in addition to that, we have regular one-to-one exchanges. I just on Friday talked to a lead designer working in the city of Helsinki, Annie, if she's here, and like other exchanges we had recently with other folks. And then at a more local level, we've been very proactively reaching out to existing meetups in Berlin, again, to make our work visible and to have a dialogue with the local community. So far, because public sector, you can say, is a bit behind compared to other countries, there haven't been many presentations from public sector at all at these meetups. So sometimes it's a bit of surprise for these meetup organizers to even have us there. So here's my colleague Sabrina, who was testing some early versions of a canvas that was later given to legislators in the ministries. And people had plenty of fun and raised good questions using the canvas. And then after the meetup, we also made sure that there are recordings done and that they're shared widely and openly, so we can reach as many people as possible. And GitHub got mentioned. There also, we put the slides, so people can just flick through them, find them there. And same goes, Pamela mentioned it earlier, design artifacts that we sometimes just create for our offices, like posters. Again, these sit on GitHub. There's a public design folder in there. So people who are interested can just download them and print them themselves. But then occasionally, we also find some really good stuff from other folks. And we're like, we could probably do something with that. So here you can see a fairly new accessibility poster from some UK government folks. That's from the Department for Work and Pensions. And we wanted to create a German translation because we have been using these and other accessibility posters in our internal accessibility onboarding for all of our new starters. So we wanted to give back. So we just made a pull request of their GitHub repository, and then the colleagues kind of merged that And you can find now the German version of the poster right next to the English one. And of course, the German poster also hangs in our office too. And then occasionally, we are not thinking about putting stuff up on GitHub. So these were some very cute stickers that were created for the members of our internal book club. So our designers, Daphne and Sabrina, they were making these mini bookshelves so that people in our teams could kind of like show off what they had read as part of the book club. And then after posting those on social media, they went a little bit viral and people were like, oh, I've read this book. Can you give me the sticker files? Where do I print that? So that was very charming. And of course, you find like all kind of like mission patches, statement stickers as well uploaded there. And then we have to consider kind of like the broader use we learned over the last few months. So we started making posters even in 2 languages. So like here an English version, but also then a German version. And people pick them up. And it's really sweet when we suddenly receive a photograph like this that came from a person working for municipality in the southwest of Germany. And I bet that person might have had some conversations with colleagues about the content of the poster, and maybe it contributes to some little change of mindset over there as well. And then now the next bigger thing is getting as well service standard reports out. So that's a collective effort between design, engineering, and product, where everyone in the team contributes to kind of like their section of the service standard. The service standard, as it's established in various countries around the world, is not mandatory in Germany. It's entirely voluntary. But by working in the open, we believe we can get more people to follow it. So kind of like leading by example. And then, of course, we're also making our little report template available as well that people can just reuse. To wrap it up, here are some small takeaways and recommendations from us as well. So one of the things of our sometimes a little bit like rocky journey is like, don't give up. It needs a lot of persuasion and every little step counts. In our conversation we had yesterday, Pamela and I said, or she said, it's about like charmingly pushy. So sometimes you have to be very gentle, but very persistent as well. And probably you have to find the formats that fit best for your context, for your circumstances, for kind of like the character of your organization, and also your character. And then last but not least, probably you don't want to look at what you haven't achieved, but what you have achieved. Because no matter how small your successes may appear, they do make a difference. So thanks from us. Thanks for listening. And yeah, questions.